This is something that haunts me, and it doesn't seem to stop. So, I started out working as a forest service ranger about 10 years ago. I did this for quite a while, to be honest, and it was something that really had a lot of perks for me. I had a bit of a dysfunctional family, so it really helped me get away from them and just everything that I didn't like in the world. So, for a long time, it was perfect. Now, even when I wasn't on duty, I'd actually go through the same woods sometimes, especially if it was a rainstorm or something, with my umbrella just to relax and unwind. I kind of come at one with that place, and I didn't feel whole without it. A few others that actually worked that job found the same thing. Every so often we bump into each other on days where we do our walks like this, and it was really pleasant. I remembered I absolutely loved the sound of the rain falling onto my umbrella, and especially during the storms. I was never too worried about being out there, especially during the time that it was nearer to October or the winter, and you would have beautiful orange coloured leaves everywhere on the floor, and lots of tall trees without too many leaves, so you could see for miles and miles. I remembered walking here, and I had a really beautiful lake up on the left of me, which was really gorgeous. You weren't allowed to go fishing here too, and people very rarely would actually go on there with boats and things, so I didn't have too much of a problem with being there. I knew I wouldn't bump into anyone. So while embarking on one of these exact walks, I did notice something strange. There seemed to be flyers everywhere. It was almost like people had pinned loads to trees. I thought this was odd, and it definitely wasn't something people were supposed to do, so I went up there to investigate. I tried to pull one down, but I just can't seem to for some reason. I actually got a small cut on my hand while trying to take it off, and I was like, wow, this is weird. I took a moment to look what it said, but there was nothing on it. It was just completely plain. That was weird. I thought maybe they were taking the trees down and they just have to mark them. It's not always that easy to see if they've spray painted on one, because obviously you have to check all sides of it, so I thought maybe this was a new invention. So I go past some more trees and eventually they stop, and it made me feel a lot better. It was really weird, but I think, well, at least they'd making some kind of effort to try and improve this place. There was actually some rumours that they were going to make a cafe or something, which is on the waterfront, which would be a good idea. But I thought this place is terrible for it. I mean, you're miles away from everyone, you're going to have no customers except us, but hey, I guess they do what they want. So I continue on my walk, and that's when I hear what sounds like an off-key piano. It sounded like just a single note, but I couldn't figure out what key it was trying to play specifically. It was quite creepy. I'd only ever seen this in horror movies before, and I really thought somebody was playing it off of some kind of device. I had a look around everywhere, but I couldn't see anything. The lake was very peaceful, and I guess that helped put me at ease seeing the nice still water with the raindrops splashing every so often. It starts to rain really heavily now. I kind of want to go investigate this, but I feel like it's not such a good idea in this weather. I mean, everything's covered in rain and water as it is, so I don't want to make myself too muddy. I decide to keep going though, and continue as if nothing was off. I start to think maybe I heard it in my head. I think, yeah, that was probably what it is. Of course it's not just a random piano here, but I wouldn't have been surprised if I'd seen one. So I just continue on. I get up to another part of the lake, which again is really beautiful. It's almost like a natural causeway of which passes through it with trees on either side. God, this place is so cool. The rain's falling so hard that it actually kicks up the smell of the muddy puddles, which is something I really don't like. So I quickly go past this, and I notice a few more things attached to trees. But I think, well, they're probably just doing a good clear out or something. I don't know. There's a lot of money in these trees probably, so maybe that's what they're doing. But I thought this place was protected. It doesn't matter so much. And I continue, and I take a moment just to take in the scenery around me. I'm basically just stopped now, on the dead centre of this path, with water on either side of me. I think this place is pretty awesome. And that's when I hear another key again. Just exactly like before, but in a slightly lower down tone. I don't know pianos well or how to describe this, but it's almost like you played a key, then you push your hand down to the left to try and replicate it again. So it sounds almost the same, but a little bit different. Again, I have no idea where this come from, and I decided just to make a move along now. I was actually getting a little bit worried about my sanity, but I've had no issues with anything like this before, nor does anybody in my family. We're not schizophrenics, we're not hearing things, so I don't know what it could be. I'm now completely convinced that somebody out here is playing music to me and I just can't figure out where. It's pretty weird though. I don't see anyone whatsoever. I decided that I should just leave this area, basically for my own safety. I mean, if there is someone here that's weirdly out in the rain, I really don't want to encounter them. And I don't want to get wet if I have to run or something. Not that it'd make much of a difference. I keep going now, and I'm following more along the path, but I keep seeing more markings on the trees as I go. It really seems like they've been placed here on purpose for me to see. It's like everywhere I go I seem to find more of it. But I guess that was an issue for another time maybe. I get closer to the water now and stop for a while. I really find a calming effect from being here. I can just see the bubbles or the splashes of the rainfall, and I think this is wonderful. I put my umbrella down a little bit later on as I try and pass through some more thick trees. I then put it up again, and I'm sure I see the flash of someone else's umbrella. It's a white coloured one held up quite high. It's probably about 7 or 8 feet tall, and it's kind of just stood there motionlessly, and I think maybe somebody's under there smoking or something. I'm pretty sure I can see a glowing ember of something, which is red coloured. And I think I see 2, so I think there's probably a couple of people smoking over here. Now, I keep going though, and again, I hear the piano sound. I think this is really weird, but I'm certain it's behind me. It sounds like it's probably about 20 minutes south of where I just come from, so there's no real reason to panic here. So off we go. I'm not able to actually reach the other person with the umbrella because they're on the other side of the water, but I can certainly see them. I can't see the embers anymore, so I think that they're probably just standing there, maybe waiting out the rain. But that's the first revelation. Where they're standing should be really difficult to get to. They're basically on a big island thing, but I don't see any boats, and you're not supposed to dock over there. It's to do with disturbing the wildlife and stuff, but this is weird. As I walk along the water, I am constantly expecting to find some kind of evidence of a boat or at least something to explain all of this, but nothing comes up. So I don't really know. It did actually make me somewhat uneasy. I'm someone who's quite proud of being brave in these situations, but I didn't feel so good now. Again, nothing to worry about. Just another crack in the simulation, I say to myself. At the time I was quite big into the simulation theory, and I thought this was just all a weird part of it. I'm still noticing that there's markings on the trees, but I'm not making too much of it now. I've almost grown used to it. Now that's when I noticed something was definitely different. I was still hearing the piano sound, but I was so fixated on what was going on the other side of the lake that I didn't think anything of it. When I realise it, I actually feel fear quite strongly. I know now that if I continue where I am for about 2 miles or so, I'm probably going to reach civilization and a road, so I think, yeah, we've got ahead for that. I'm actually growing a little bit worried now. But eventually, the piano sound stops. I do turn back to see if the person with the umbrella is still on the island, and I then realise that they've moved. The umbrella hasn't moved in terms of how high up it is, but the position has. It seems like they've just stood at the very end of the shoreline, trying their best not to be seen by me. It was definitely a bit creepy now. I just don't know why somebody would want to be there, or why they seem to be almost following me. I mean, there's a good chance that they didn't see me. I mean, my raincoat's pretty dark coloured, and so are all of my clothes and my umbrella, so it's going to be hard to see me if you were trying. And yeah, maybe it was just a person standing at the edge of the shoreline, just observing like I was. I mean, God, it's probably another me, but I don't think too much about that. And I continue as I'm probably about 500 meters away from relative safety again. Feeling a lot better about things, I decide just to continue on and let the scary thoughts slowly leave my mind. Now I get closer to more man-made stuff, and again I feel good, but something felt very different here. Everything looks kind of odd. It's almost like you found the remnants of where something once was, in terms of lots of stone buildings with stone walls, and they don't look like they're from recently. They must have been from hundreds of years ago. I thought, wow, I've never realised this place is here. But I think, yeah, this is probably just how it was, and I never noticed it. But I noticed that's weird. I see some large rocks which seem to have just been placed there balanced, which again is odd. Now this is where it gets a bit creepy. There was a fog which come on very acutely and pretty much blocked all of my vision, and the vision into the different areas surrounding here. I don't know if any of you have ever played the Silent Hill game, but it was kind of like that, where you're walking through the fog and you can't really see far in front of yourself and everything looks the same. I didn't seem to be getting anywhere in particular, which was quite frightening. I looked up and I was sure I just saw the exact same view I had before. I did actually start to panic a bit now, as I was very confused as to what was happening. Then once again, there's that familiar piano sound which I just cannot make out. Where is it coming from? Why is this happening to me? And I'm met with another flyer looking thing on the tree. I know I'd kind of half dabbled with the idea of the simulation theory, but this is actually really scaring me now. The rain doesn't seem to be so loud too, but I think this is just from the fear. It was like my brain had shut out the normal sounds to try and pick up on the abnormal or something, and I keep going. I'm kind of picking up a fast pace, and I can't stop thinking of how much this is like that game I'd played. I almost wondered if I'd actually fell asleep at the console, and I was actually playing it still, but I obviously wasn't. That's when I noticed something else weird. There seems to be bats. Now there are no bats in this area whatsoever, but I can see 3 or 4 on another island further up. They're just flying around like bats do, but why on earth were they here? There are literally none. There shouldn't be anything. Now the piano sound had stopped, but I still seemed to be walking through the remnants of almost like an uncovered ancient civilization with only stoned remains. This is too weird. It's still very difficult to see because of the fog and whatnot, but off I go. I have to keep pressing forward to try and get out of here. And that's when I feel something. I felt like sweat beaded off my head, and for a second I closed my eyes. Bizarrely though, a second that I do that, I seem to have, for only maybe 2 seconds, but a perfectly clear kind of like drone shot of myself, or bird's eye view. It was so weird, it was just like that video game. I'm now very convinced that maybe I fell asleep or something and I was playing the game, and I try my best to wake myself up, but I just can't seem to. I then go and splash my face with some of the lake water, and that seems to help, but it assures me that I'm in fact awake. I've never seen anything like it before. Now what really creeps me out is I was able to see round a corner that I shouldn't have been able to unless I had a drone footage shot. Just what I'd seen in my head. Now as I'm walking, suddenly the fog seems to clear up. I mean honestly, it was like being at the edge of a cloud. I look up and things are how they should be. I look back and I just see the fog and I think, wow, I must have got really lost in there. I start to run through the possibilities in my head, but none seem to make logical sense, so I just walk on like normal. Now I didn't see anyone for a while, until suddenly bang. There's a big sudden populous area, and life and the sounds of it are all there like they should be. So where did I just come from? Now I'd love to say this is where that all stopped, but it doesn't. Let me take you on a journey into something that really scares me. So, all is pretty much normal after that for a number of years. And so I'm sitting down in the park cafe that we've got with one of my other friends who's also a ranger here. He then tells me, "Hey, I thought we turned off the radio." I say, "Yeah, we did." He then says, "No, did you hear it?" I say, "What?" Honestly completely forgetting about what happened before. It's a piano sound. I then look at him very confused and I hear it too. It makes me jolt and I actually spill some of my coffee because of it, how hard I've shuddered. There is in fact a piano sound coming from outside which is just like what I've heard before. My friend then tells me that he's never heard this and I explain my story. He then looks concerned and that's where that ended at that time. So everything basically goes on like normal now and I'm really freaked out by this. But it doesn't stop here. I was on a family vacation where we stayed in a cabin somewhere and I went out fishing with my brother and then I hear it again, the piano sound. I say, "Come on, you've got to hear that," but my brother can't hear it and I really think that I'm going insane. Then he tells me that he hears it too. We had a truly good search for the source of the sound, but we couldn't find anything. I mean, we were probably out there searching for God knows how long, but we didn't find a thing. Literally nada. Nothing. And it really annoyed me. I say, "Thank God you heard that. I thought I was going insane." I then tell my brother about how many times I've heard this sound, and he then asks me about where do I work specifically. He then tells me that he's heard that apparently some of it's native land, and that there's supposedly spirits that haunt there, and if you don't bless the area when you go in, or give some kind of offering, then scary things can happen. Apparently people hear their own voice echoed to them calling for help, or speaking complete gibberish out in the woods. He tells me that we should probably leave now, and we do go back to the cabin. I went in the cabin though. I'm just about to fall asleep for the night, and I hear the sounds of maybe hundreds of ping pong balls getting thrown at the side walls. I just think to myself, what on earth is that? And think that it's some of the children there just playing a trick on me, and ended up falling asleep. But oh no, I woke up and asked about it and nobody seems to know a thing. So I was definitely unhappy now. This was supposed to be a really fun family getaway, but it was turning into most of a nightmare for me. But what can I do? I guess I'm the crazy one. So a couple of years passed by and life moves pretty quickly, and I had my first son. Everything was going really well, and I'm invited to go on a camping trip with one of my friends. I was very excited for this, and unfortunately, my body decided to back out just as we were about to start up the thing, but I decided to keep going. We're actually quite far from where I live, or at least where we plan to go together, but it's not an issue. I didn't know the area too well, but everything's as it should be, and I'm gathering wood for my fire. Now I get everything there, and as soon as I light up the fire, there's some kind of strange feeling. It doesn't feel like I'm being followed, it doesn't feel like I'm being chased, but it kind of felt like deja vu, you know? Almost like I was repeating actions which I'd done before. It was very odd. I would have jumped to blame it on the simulation before, but I didn't really believe in that stuff now. So as I get my firewood and start throwing it on the fire, I just feel really uneasy now. It was strange, it was kind of like the feeling of being in a dream or something, and I do feel my fear starting to rise. And it takes me a little while as I start to calm myself down and not panic at anything that's happening, which now is extremely difficult for me to do. I tell myself to just shut up and go for a walk. I've got into the habit of telling myself to shut up sometimes when my mind is racing, and I find that it helps me a lot. So I keep going, and eventually get far enough away that I can just about see my campfire. And I suddenly felt something in my body. It was like an instinct took over, and I turn and start running back towards the camp. It was only when I got back into my tent and zipped it up for the night that I start to feel relaxed. I start to read a book, and then As if my soul was pierced, I hear it. The key of an off-tuned piano once more. Now I actually dropped the book in fear. Now, it's been about 5 hours since this has happened and I've not slept, and day has broke now and woke me up, and I'm writing this on my phone. I don't know what is happening or why this seems to be following me, but I know it's not all in my head because others have heard it. I just don't know what to do to make it stop. Now, my fiancé first encountered this thing in 2013. Him and his friends were on a camping trip in the middle of the woods in Maine. Literally middle of nowhere. No houses, really nothing for miles. They had a small fire going, but due to rain, it was hard to keep it going. They kept hearing something trying to creep up on them, but it was a kind of noise that sounded like it was big, but on 2 feet. They started throwing rocks in the direction that they heard the footsteps, and suddenly, there was a horrifying scream. None of them had actually heard anything like it before. He describes it as though something sounded like a fox but more human. It went crashing through the woods clumsily, but trying to come back almost. They had to fend it off with rocks for most of the night. The second time was about 1 or 2 years later. He went on a solo camping trip in Vermont since it was something he enjoyed, and then heard the exact same blood-curdling scream that he heard the first time. He was just sitting alone in the dark, just basically staring into the fire, when suddenly, the scream comes back again. This time, without hesitation, he picks up everything that he needs, packs up and goes home. The third time was tonight. He was supposed to go out to my car to grab us a couple of bottles of water when he heard voices. Due to us recently having someone coming onto our property and stealing from our landlords, we were actually paranoid at this. Now, he went out to investigate. He calls me and tells me to let the dog out. As he was sneaking around, the voices turned to a snarling sound. He quickly stopped, turned off his flashlight, dropped to the ground, and the dog was standing next to him. Suddenly he sees 2 glowing eyes and it lunges at him. The dog gets excited and starts chasing it. The whole time they're chasing it, it's screaming and running faster than our dog. Even though he was running with a flashlight, he couldn't make out the shape of its body. He says how far apart the eyes were make it seem very large, but he can't really get a shape of it. It seems discoloured and somewhat distorted. It kept looking back at him while he chased it, and its eyes were just glowing while it screamed. Our dog chased it off into the woods, but luckily she came back. I think it was trying to lure him in there by making the sound similar to what the dog did. But he couldn't make out the height either because it went from squatting to standing and running. God knows what this thing was. I was a child living on a gravel road in southern Ohio in the late 1950s to early 1960s. At times, my grandmother would tell me to get to the front porch, saying they're coming. She'd say, soon, about 30 or so Civil War soldiers in blue would walk by the house in broad daylight, totally physical, actually kicking up rocks and stuff on the road, talking amongst themselves. Some in small groups and some alone, uniforms torn and dirty. They never responded to us. They just walked on, behind our barn and over the hill. This happened many times over the years. Now, I didn't know what to think of it, though later on, I saw a documentary on the Civil War and learned that those soldiers often walked home hundreds of miles. Many didn't survive the walk actually. I always wondered if they were trying to get back home or something. Now, the following is a series of weird things that happened to me that I truly can't explain. Now, what annoys me most about this is that I've tried to tell people my experience and they kind of just laugh it off. Actually, I told one of my colleagues at work today. I work as a Forest Server fire patrol person, but when I told them my story, they kind of just laughed at me and said, "Oh yeah, is that really what happened?" And that really annoys me. And this is supposed to be someone that's quite similar and that I'd actually consider a friend there, and also had weird experiences before, so I just don't get it. People are so eager to hear what you say, but then they're so happy and quick to dismiss everything. I just don't get it. But let's dive into my story and hopefully at least a few of you will understand. Now, emotionally, I wasn't really the same after this. I don't know why. I'm not a spiritual person and I don't really believe in religion much, but this kind of made me think about what else is really out there. Where I live, there can be lots of snow all the time, but I love to go on my little adventures, and there was a forest that was supposedly haunted near where I lived. Now, I'd heard quite a few things about this place, and apparently you'll hear screams in the night, you'll see headless people wandering around, and I guess just the works really. Now, I'd actually been here on 2 occasions before. One was when I drove out with one of my friends, but to be honest, it was just the biggest waste of time. I mean, literally nothing happened. We were driving for a long time to get there, and basically nothing happened, and we just get bored and come back. So I wasn't expecting too much in the second time that I'd been there. Again, nothing had happened, but in more recent times, I'd moved much closer and thought, why not go? Also, there was quite a nice snowfall, so I thought this was pretty cool. I really like going on adventures at night time like this, especially when the elements are involved. For whatever reason, it kind of makes me feel almost like I'm in a movie, especially if I've got my AirPods with me and I just listen to songs, and it really creates a vibe. I always found it empowering, but yeah. So I set out at night and I walked towards the forest off of the main path, and it's really dark. The stars are looking absolutely beautiful above me, and luckily there's no cars coming, so I just get off and straight into where the forest starts. There was probably about 30 meters of snow or whatnot before it actually starts. Then you're hit by lots of trees. Now I turn my flashlight on and suddenly I can see really well. I had a really powerful one that was actually adapted for cameras and stuff. I was actually joking with one of my friends, it's like turning on the daytime and there's nothing to be scared of. And I also said that this probably scares away the spirits more than anything. They probably think it's God. I think of these jokes as I can see my breath in front of me from the cold. Now, it's kind of like the snow that's falling quite quickly to the ground, almost like it's kind of sleet, but it's not. It's still snowing. I notice it as I take my first steps into the forest. I have some pretty skinny trees on either side of me when I see something that looks odd. I can see what appears to be a white silhouette to my left when suddenly it vanishes. I'm a little confused by this, but suddenly I realise that it must be my breath from where I've got my scarf and things. I think it's a little odd and I tell myself just to relax a bit, and I keep walking. The trees are kind of like overarching here and it actually looks really beautiful. I do notice one odd thing. There seems to be footprints that lead off from the main trail, but they kind of look like hoof shapes. I thought maybe some kind of animal went through here, or God knows what. It couldn't have been horse riding because the branches are actually too low. To give you an idea, they're probably about 8 feet above me or dropping down to 5, so you'd have to duck sometimes. Now these aren't nice branches too. They're the kinds that come snagged on each other, and if you make one loose, it's going to kind of whip you in the face. And I didn't want to lose my eyes. But it wasn't too much of an issue really. So when I set off, I didn't really have a direction or place that I wanted to go to. I heard there was an old church that used to be here, and I thought, you know what, that would be pretty cool if I can find that. Who knows what would happen if I go there on my own. Now at the time, I was certain there were other people around because I literally can't hear anything or see anyone. A really good telling sign is the fact that there's no lights. You kind of need lights to see where you're going out here, but I literally couldn't see any. Every so often, I look off into the woods and I don't see anything. I did notice 1 or 2 strange sounds, but they didn't happen too frequently. I know that there's lots of animals out here because of my normal line of work, and just I guess from having some good sense about my surroundings, so I didn't let it put me off. I knew I had to be careful of certain animals out here because I guess some could hunt at night, but I was going to be far bigger and they wouldn't dare go to me. The sky almost looks like a beautiful orangey colour above me because of my torch, and I think that's really pretty. I do start to feel the cold a bit now, so decide to pick up the pace. Another interesting thing is there's lots and lots of footprints on this path which have been here earlier. And I think that's a little bit bizarre because usually people don't hum here too often. I'm very used to going out here and there's no one around. So that was interesting. As I'm walking, the snow's now going directly into my face and it actually made it a bit annoying, to be honest. I stopped for a moment to try and figure out the direction of it so I can try and avoid it when I hear a howling off. Now I don't know exactly where it's coming from, but there seems to be another little trail where you can cut through going off of the main path, but I decide not to follow it just in case. I was kind of expecting to run into some crazy dog walker or something, but they never showed up, so I think this is a little bit odd. Eventually I come up to one of the trail signs and I can see some of the wildlife that lives here, and I think to myself, well, there's definitely nothing that's going to hunt me, as it's just birds and things like that. But I do wonder what the sound is that I heard. Now, I go a little bit further along, and eventually the snow picks up even more now. It felt a little bit different, and almost like the weather had become more hostile now. Again, I'm not a spiritual person, but it almost started to feel a bit more like the air was different here. Now, the only way I can describe what I was seeing if you haven't been in the woods at night in the snow is everything sort of looks like an infinite dream. It's almost like somebody's made an unlimited map of just forest, snow, woods, and it's just going to keep on going forever. You do have to be careful out here though, because if you really go off the path, then you don't want to be stuck out in the cold like this. As you can imagine, trying to get a fire going is not easy at the best of times, let alone here. As I'm thinking of this, I hear sounds up above again. I can hear somebody scurrying through the tree line. Well, at least that's what I think it is. And I pause for a second, and I go to switch my flashlight with one that has more of a focus beam. And I kid you not, as this is happening, I can see what appears to be a really small kind of lanky armed person scurrying through the woods. And I take a moment to figure out what this is. I quickly flicker on my other light, which is more powerful, and I don't see anything, so I just put it down to my mind going a little bit loose. I do have to say, I've never seen anything like this, and I think this is really weird. Annoyingly, my eyes didn't adjust well enough in the darkness to actually see this thing, and I have tried telling this part to some other people, but again, they all just say, oh yeah, it's just a rabbit. But I mean, come on, I've seen rabbits, and this thing had lanky arms. I can only describe it as if a person was about 3 feet tall, had a very large torso, and very long skinny arms that dragged the floor. But I don't know where they've gone. I tried looking around for more footprints, but I can't see anything, and this gives me a little bit of adrenaline to pick up the pace. I knew I'd gone out here hoping to find some ghosts and things, but now I wasn't so sure if I actually wanted to find them or not. Now again, I can see a mist form just in front of me, then slowly disappear again. It was a white mist, and it's really like somebody's just breathed in front of me and then vanished. I try and replicate how I was standing a few moments ago and pace backwards and start breathing more heavily to see if it was me, but there's nothing there. Pretty confused at this point, but I decided to just pick up the pace more. Now, I had one other scary experience before from being out in the woods I can think of now, but this was more to do with an animal than anything supernatural. I remember I'd gone somewhere and a big old moose appeared, and it was extremely close to me. For whatever reason, it didn't really take notice of me, it just looked at me for a second, but I remember that scared me. But that feeling that I had was kind of beginning to loom over me, and I started to wonder if maybe there was a large animal like that around. Now this is when I noticed the first strange structure. It's something that I hadn't realised before. It's a large wooden structure that looks like 3 trees, kind of in a Stonehenge shape, but a little bit less spread out. This is really weird. It's like they've been carved by hand and placed upright. And what was really bizarre is that there isn't much snow in the middle. It seems like the ground is staying particularly dry here, and not snow forming. Now, I think this is really bizarre because, well, where I am there shouldn't be anything like this. I would have been aware of it too, and I don't understand why I'd never noticed it before. It now becomes apparent that I'm not actually on the main path. I switch off my flashlight once more, and I just take a few seconds to take in everything. I'm trying to give my eyes some time to adjust to the darkness, and I look down at my battery. It's dropped down to 40% on the main flashlight thing, and that's a bit of a worry. Batteries drain pretty quick in the cold, and now I notice that there's more of the mist forming up ahead of me. I actually take a second just to assess what this actually is, but I can't figure out what it is. It's almost like a group of people standing there, kind of just like breathing or talking normally, but there's no one around, and it only seems to be spawning in a specific spot. Now, I once more get closer and try and figure out what this is, but I just can't. Now it reminds me of a story of what one of my other Fire Ranger friends had told me about. Sorry to go off topic, but I think it's important because it might have been linked to what I saw. Now, one of my good friends had been working in the service for quite a number of years, and he would always try and prank us and pretend there was scary things out there. We never believed him, and sometimes he would actually get us with Halloween masks and stuff, and that was pretty creepy. But I remember one day that he come up to us and he looked very freaked out. He said, "Guys, I saw something and I don't know what it is." We ask him to elaborate and he refuses for a while, but because I'm good friends with him, eventually he decides to tell me what he saw. Apparently, he thought he saw a fire, so he went over to investigate it. Apparently it was just a small red cherry glow, but that could be the start of something. Just as he got to where it was, it suddenly went out, and there was a very big mist that appeared, which is like a smoky white colour. It almost looked like there was a huge fire in terms of the amount of smoke, but nothing was burning. He said it stayed here for literally 3 or 4 minutes as he stared at this bewildered, until eventually it just vanishes. Now the reason that I'm telling you this is because it was incredibly similar to what I saw, in terms of how he described it, the way that it moved, the slight opaqueness of it, everything was just weird. I stood there for what must have been about a good 4 minutes before eventually I decided that, yeah, I'm probably gonna have to press through this now. I couldn't be waiting around here all day, and I decided to be brave and walk through it. I actually held my breath just before I did so because I didn't know if it was maybe some kind of dangerous chemical or something that had leaked out, but there wasn't anything. I eventually make it through after what felt like ages, to be honest, and I was actually gasping for breath. It probably took me a good 20 seconds to get through this. Eventually when I do, I turn around to try and figure out where it had gone, and I can't see it. I do think that I can see something just moving off into the distance, but I can't be sure. It was almost like a group of people had vanished, but one of them had just went off into the woods. Now, I'm a little bit freaked out, but again, I was here alone, so there's not really too much I can think of this. Now, I do notice something else very weird. There seems to be lots of really bizarre shaped footprints going off in different directions. They're all kind of like the hoof shaped, like the thing I'd seen earlier, but they're really far spread apart. like something quite tall had been walking. But it's walking as though that it's in complete arrogance to the trees that are there, like they don't exist. And again, I don't know what kind of animal could have done this. Now I walk on. I haven't really got a direction this time. I just know that I need to keep going. I have a feeling that I'm in a bad spot, and that's when I see something. This time I was certain that I was seeing something that was actually there. It was very far away, but I can only describe this as something which is completely black, with these white tusk arm things that was about 4 feet tall that hops around. I only saw this for a couple of seconds and it vanishes, but it's probably the scariest part of the encounter for me. I don't want to describe it as like a demonic thing because again, I'm not spiritual, but I don't really know what this was. It's like a really weird creature that would stand awkwardly and almost like it was just bent out too far and shouldn't be balanced, but it was. I flash on both the lights at the same time searching for it, but again, I don't see anything. I then realise that I'm not too far from a lake that I'm actually familiar with, and that's when I noticed a strange glow coming from the other side of it. Now, it was kind of like a glow of like a power plant would give, I guess, in the horizon. Almost like heat waves of light just emanating out slowly, again in the white colour, but almost having more of an energy to it. I decide that I have to investigate. Now, I was actually stupidly close to the shoreline now, because one slip, one twisted ankle, and I could go through the ice and no one would get me here. I'd die of hypothermia before rescuers could find me, but the sense of adventure had taken over. I turn my light around again, and I can't see anything. For a second, I'm sure I can make out the faint glow of 2 eyes, but I don't know if this is just an animal, so I'm not too worried. There's also strange sounds coming from over where that the light is, and it's almost like lots of people talking played backwards, really far off, really far, like barely audible, but I could hear it. The forest was pretty quiet at this time, and I think it made it worse. I'm constantly flashing around with my lights, trying to just get whatever this is to show up more, but I can't see anything. Now, I know some people are asking me why wasn't I more scared of that weird thing I'd seen, and to be honest, I can't tell you that. It was almost like I was drawn into something and a mixed personality had taken over where I was seeing weird things and they weren't welcoming, but they weren't worrying for whatever reason, like I had to go on further. I decided that I need to keep up my pace now, but I have some pretty good thoughts and I think, well, I don't want to fall in the water and die, so I go off now. At this part, the trees are a lot thicker than before, and that was a bit more reassuring. But that lake, I'm constantly hearing sounds from over where that lake is, and I just cannot for the life of me figure out what they are. I actually can't remember the sounds too well, and I don't know if it was because I was in a bit of a heightened state during the experience, but I just remember they were weird sounds, like scratching and things like that. Now, I know it could have easily been a group of people on drugs or God knows what, but given the weather conditions, I think that's extremely unlikely. Again, this is something one of my incredible colleagues told me that that's what this could have been, and joking that it was green men and aliens, but I don't understand it, because again, these people are so interested to hear what I was saying, and maybe they're denying it because they're scared of what I'm telling them, or just refuse to believe it, but that annoyed me. And I've always been somebody who has the ability to break down the physics of things. If something has happened, I don't immediately go to the irrational explanation. I think with a scientific mind, but it failed me this day, because I can't come up with much for what was happening to me. Now I continue on as the snow gets a little bit thicker now. I think the reason for this might have been because there weren't as many thin trees blocking out all of the snow to capture it. just quite a few big ones with more space in between, but it did actually make my legs hurt. I noticed my knees are quite cold, so my remedy for this is once again to pick up the pace. I clear some of the snow that's actually settled on me, and I actually feel a bit better now. There's quite a big drop off down to the lake now, and I realise that I'm going uphill. What was weird though is that I haven't been to this area before, and I can't really find it. Even since I've been back to the forest again, I've never been able to find this exact spot. Now, it was like somebody had described the area that I was in to somebody else, and they'd tried to make it but not done it exactly the same. And you kind of know deep down that you're not in exactly the same place, but there's enough familiarity for you to feel confident in the situation. Now, as I get closer to the light that I could see, I realised that this definitely isn't the moonlight, because it was kind of flickering like it had an electrical energy to it, and was kind of flashing around into the clouds a little bit. Not like lightning, but kind of like the northern lights, and that was what I find really bizarre. Just the whole energy of whatever this was is like nothing that I've ever seen before. A little bit scared now, I start to slowly pan around trying to see anything, but I can't find a thing. Every so often I hear sounds of movement behind me, but I can't be sure what this is. I decide that I just need to keep it moving, and that was one of the things that made me feel more safe in this situation now. I eventually come up onto the bend and I start approaching towards where the light is directly now. Now again, I'm not too scared or shy of adventures, so I have to keep pressing forward one step at a time. I do notice something odd, and that's that there aren't any steps up here. I know people might not have gone here in the daytime, but it does seem weird because there was just so many earlier that I'd seen pretty much everywhere. The snow had actually slowed down a little bit and it wasn't as abrasive on my face, and this was quite nice. My nose and toes always seem to suffer, especially in the cold, along with my hands. I think I have a problem where they don't have very good blood, or they just seem to switch off in the cold, but it made the going a little bit tough and less comfortable. Now, had I found the ghost that I was looking for? Not just yet. So I decide that I need to go towards the light, but again, the way that the light is kind of bouncing off the clouds, almost like it's the northern lights, was just really strange. I was incredibly drawn into this, almost like I was looking at a hypnotist's watch. It was incredibly beautiful, but just really weird. I didn't know if it was related to an electrical storm, but it wouldn't really make sense for me. I have seen something bizarre while working on the service, so again, a little bit similar to this. I remembered one time that I was working. I was actually in the station and I just made myself a coffee. I went to step outside and had a look around at the sky at night just because it's so beautiful, and I do notice something odd. There's almost like a large blue electrical ball of light in the sky. It's opaque and not really visible, and it only lasted for a few seconds, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. A few of my colleagues had actually reported seeing it as well while on duty at the exact same time that I did, and this kind of had the same characteristics, but it wasn't identical. But I want to find out what this is, and I wasn't as scared as I was before. Now, the closer I get, there's something else I notice which is pretty bizarre, and that's that the sky seems to be kind of imitating this very loosely. It's almost like somebody turned on a pulse of electricity through the clouds above me. It's almost like the northern lights are above the whole sky now, but extremely faint, but the same colour as the clouds, so again, it's almost like they were pulsating a bit. I did get scared because there's a eye condition that someone in my family has, which is actually a little bit similar to this, but I've been tested for it multiple times since and after this event, and it's always come up clear. But in the moment, I was pretty scared because I really worry about having issues with my vision. Now, luckily it turned out it wasn't my eyes, and I quickly did some tests by looking at the ground and things that weren't moving to realise that nothing was off. But why was the sky moving? I wasn't so sure what was happening, but I wasn't that far away now from where I needed to be. That's when I noticed another wooden structure. It's similar to what I've seen before, but it kind of formed more of a hexagon type of shape. Every so often I would see these on either sides of the trail, and they seemed to be increasing in frequency as I got closer to the light. I only saw about 3 more of them, but again, never seen it since. I stop for a moment, and I can see my breath on my light as I take my mask down just to try and get a better feel of what was happening. I shine the torch around, but again, I don't see much of anything. Don't know what I was expecting to see. I've just got the glow dead ahead of me now, and I know I have to get there. It's not much longer now before I'm there, so at least I've got that to look forward to, and I can eventually start heading back. I'm not sure how far I'd actually come at this point, but I've probably been walking for about a good 50 or 60 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but usually you'll feel it more than I was in this situation, because walking in the snow is actually really difficult sometimes, and the cold can kind of zap out all of your energy. Now, I'm not too far away from where this is, and I can hear the voices again. It sounds like whispering. I can make out the odd word or two, but nothing seems to be in a language that I understand. It's definitely in a language though, and it hasn't increased in volume or anything since when I first heard it earlier. I don't know if it was there the whole time because I kind of just zoned out to it, but I suddenly noticed it much more than I had done earlier. And again, this is pretty weird to me because, like I said, I've never heard anything like it, and it is a bit creepy. Now, I eventually come up to the last clearing where the light should be, and I'm quite excited to get here. There seems to be lots of footsteps here everywhere, so I'm pretty convinced that I've made it back onto the main path now. I've got a good feeling now, and I know that there must be somebody there, so I feel pretty happy. So, what do? Take my steps around it. I can definitely hear the voices on the right side of me now, and I keep stopping every couple of seconds to approximate exactly where it is. Every so often I see movement up ahead of me, and I'm convinced that it's people out here now, so I feel much more relaxed and reassured. I'm now going down the last straight part that I have to go to, with the trees kind of forming an arch above me, and the snow still everywhere around me. Now, some people have asked me why did I keep going and what was I actually doing out there. That was my friends at work earlier, and I don't know. I guess it kind of felt like I'd been there for too long and I was at least going to get something out of it, and yeah. So, I continue up and I eventually find where the clearing is, and I realise that I've only got about another 20 feet of a walk to figure out what this is, and I can see movement again. I decide that the best thing to do in this situation is just to slowly sneak up on who or whatever it is up ahead of me. Now yes, I've got them, I think. I can see some more lights ahead too. I see 2, then 3, then they go out. I don't have my light on at this point because I want the element of surprise. The snow is coming against me, but not directly in my face, so this is pretty pleasant. Now, I come up to where I can hear the voices finally getting louder and louder, and my excitement is growing. It feels like I've been here for too long trying to figure out what is actually going on, and I'm gonna get my taste of it soon. I am kind of looking over my shoulder every so often though, because I do hear sounds like I'm being followed. Again, I keep thinking I'm seeing movement, but there's not much of anything when I focus, so I try not to think of it. I don't actually have my torch on now, so I can't verify the fact that there's nothing there, But again, I just presumed it was people. And I thought, well, they haven't said anything to me, and I'm not disturbing them, so why are they going to be annoyed at me? It was almost like an overconfidence, and eventually, I come up to the tree line and the clearing. I start going a lot slower now as I get closer and closer to where I can hear them all. Now the chanting is still illegible, and I take my first step up, and I look around and I can see what must be hundreds of people all standing around the edge of some kind of clearing. They've all got their hands raised up and they're making some weird chanting sound. Now they're not actually that close to me, so it's pretty difficult to make out how tall they are, but these things seem really small. I say things because I don't know if they were people unless they were on their knees, but that's what it looked like. I start to shake a little bit as I feel a lot more like I'm in danger now. I decide that I'm gonna slowly turn my flashlight on for a second and figure out what this actually is. My eyes adjust more and more to the darkness every couple of seconds, and I notice something wrong. They don't look like normal people. The shape of them's all wrong and their arms are too long. And they're all either wearing some white things on their arms, but it looks very pointy, just like the things I'd seen earlier. I try as best I can to slowly flicker on the torch, but I cannot do it. Again, I start shaking more and more and try and press it, but nothing happens. I keep on and on flicking until eventually it flashes on, and for a split second I can see these things. They're like very dark small creatures with weird pointy arms, all facing up to the sky making some weird sounds. Their mouths are what really scare me. It's like just a circle with lots of jagged teeth. And just as I'm taking this all in, they suddenly vanish, and so does the sounds. I quickly fire the torch around everywhere trying to see where they've gone, but I can't see anything. I can hear my heartbeat in my ears like a constant rhythmic drum. And then, a few moments later, I hear movement, rustling and the sounds as though hundreds of people are all coming towards me suddenly, and I take off. I turn my torch on and quickly dart up ahead of myself, constantly looking over my shoulder with the torch. What I have just seen, I don't know, but I knew that I was in danger and had to get out of there. Luckily, I can retrace my footprints for most of the journey until I get away from the clearing. I can hear the sounds are still coming after me, just much slower than me, but they're still coming. I stop for a second and fire the torch around everywhere but can't see anything, and I drop it. Now, I managed to drop it not only into the snow, but face first, and that also means there's no light illuminating back at me, it's kind of buried. Just as I say to myself, you've got to be kidding me, I can hear something else not far up ahead of me. So I take off. Thank God I actually brought the other torch with me, because I'm absolutely certain at the fact that I would have had cardiac arrest otherwise. Now, the only problem I've got is the other torch isn't that easily accessible right now. I put it away when I was trying to hide and be not heard, but now I'm starting to think that wasn't really a good idea. And because I've had this on and so close to my face, I haven't really adjusted to the dark, and I don't know where I'm going. I used to be quite good at long distance cross country, so I have that in my favour. But I soon realise those years are way behind me, and I come up to a point where there's two paths. One's much smaller and seems untrodden but should be closer to where I need to get to. The other is what seems to be closer to where the light is, and I have to choose the latter. Now I take off down this path, and I keep fumbling trying to get the other torch on, but for whatever reason I just can't seem to do it. I don't know if it was for the fact that it was in the cold for too long, but In those moments, it just would not come back to life again, and I'm just hitting it on my palm constantly. Now, it's extremely difficult to navigate in this moment. I think I know where I'm going, but I can't really tell. There's clearly lots and lots of different footprints on this path, and I can't tell if they're normal or not because I was rushing so much, but it gives me some reassurance that I must be going in a relatively good direction to escape whatever this is. Now, I should mention at this point that the sounds are long gone. I'd absolutely blitzed something that seemed like it couldn't go much quicker than a light walking pace, but it didn't matter. I don't know what was chasing me or why. I don't know what I'd just disturbed. Eventually, I flick my torch on again, and I illuminate the rest of the way back. I turn it off again quickly because I'm not sure how good the battery is and I really needed to conserve it. I stop for a few moments to collect my breath and look around me, and I think I know my bearings now, and I start to walk. The only reason that I had to walk now is because I was so out of breath and exhausted from moving in the snow that I genuinely was going to have to crawl the rest of the way out otherwise. I now make it up to another clearing where I can see the lake. I look around everywhere, and what's really weird, I can't see the light glow that I saw earlier. It's genuinely nowhere. I was convinced that I should still at least be able to see that out of all things, but there's literally nothing. I don't get it. And the sky, it still didn't look right, but it wasn't like before. So where did the light go? I didn't have much time to focus on it, but I was truly perplexed, and this is something that I still think about now. I managed to get my torch on again, and I don't know, it sounds stupid, but I was trying to recharge whatever energy it was and fire it around everywhere, hoping to see the light again, just to know it was there. But again, I don't see anything. Now, I'm pretty spooked out now, but I have to keep going. I eventually make it into a more familiar area, and I'm actually feeling confident finally. I've adopted more of a walking pace because I was a little bit worried that if anyone was out there and I ran up on them, they might think I was trying to attack them. I do stop constantly though, and look around, desperately trying to see something or anything around me, but again, I can't see anything or anyone. I was desperately hoping that I'd see a group of people just to explain what I'd seen, or at least to be able to tell somebody, but I can't see anything. The snow's picked up a little bit more now, and it wasn't pleasant. I realised too that I must have been out of here for quite a long while because the battery's virtually entirely drained on the torch. I know because it's gone pretty dim. I probably have the worst torch in the world because when the battery's low it goes really dim to conserve it, but it doesn't last very long, so what's the point? The other light that I have is far superior, but that's long gone. I decide to leave it for whatever's out there to enjoy it. I know I'm never seeing that thing again. I'm someone who usually hates losing things too, but I was so scared I didn't even think about trying to recover it. Now, the trees are getting thinner and thinner, and that gives me a pretty good idea that I'm not too far away from where I need to be now. I can't be 100% certain that I'm back to safety, but this is a pretty good indicator of it being the case. Now, I continue this walking pace, and I'm constantly looking behind myself. Now, momentarily, I start shaking again and don't know why. Then suddenly, I realise I hear something making a screeching sound. It's kind of at a medium volume, but it sounds like it's coming from exactly behind where I was. I'm not so worried now because with a few steps, I'm eventually back to where the forest ends, and I'm not too far from safety. I look around for anything to have been following me, but I can't see anything, and I quickly make my way over to my car. I start it up, turn the lights on full, and take one last look into the forest, and I can't see anything. I get back into my car and drive the rest of the way home, completely in shock about the whole experience. Now, I really don't know what happened to me that day, And I truly, truly don't like sharing my story with colleagues at work because they don't really listen to me. But I know what I saw, and I don't know what it was. It could have been spiritual, it could have been anything, but I sure as hell don't have a clue what that was, and that scares me